right. Here we go. Bringing it home. They're letting the baby go first. Hey, everybody. Again, I'm Jimmy Alcoholic. January the 27th of 2012. That was the day I surrendered officially. And since that time, my life has been blessed in ways unimaginable by my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. I came to find a relationship with a higher power that I call God. And it's revolutionized my whole outlook on life and people, both in AA and outside. I've learned a lot, and one of the things I think that it's important for me to say, not just because I believe it to be true, but also as a reminder, because my ego can sometimes get in the way and have me thinking that I know more than I do. But I can truly say the more I learn, the less I know. I've been blessed by the opportunity to get sober, and as has been shared by Amy and Kevin, a lot of the experiences that we get to have in here because of this deal. And it's nothing short of miraculous, to just sit and listen to our stories and the things that we've been through, and how much all of us were experts at making a dumpster fire out of life, and we find a seat in Alcoholics Anonymous, and then somehow that dumpster fire is transformed into some kind of miracle that surpasses all understanding. I won't call it sober. I had an accident in 1999. I was 23 years old, and I'd been up all night drinking, and ran out of booze and needed to go get more at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I set out to go do that and had a head-on collision and hit a lady and almost killed her. A few months later, on May the 10th of 1999, my dad passed away. He was 46, and 5 days after that, I went to court. And because of the circumstances of the accident, I was charged with aggravated vehicular assault, and rightfully so, and DUI. And I went to court, and Miss Nancy showed up at court in a wheelchair and a turtle suit and a neck brace, and she pleaded for mercy for me with the DA and the judge. She said that she didn't want to see my life ruined because I was looking at, prison time, felony. She said she didn't want to see my life ruined because of one really bad mistake, and that I should be given a second chance. And there was grace showing up for me, and I didn't know it. I didn't see it. I walked out of there with a mandatory minimum for a first offense DUI in the state of Tennessee of 48 hours in jail, and lost my license for a year. That was it. Miss Nancy went away from that experience and was never able to work again. It forever changed her life and the lives of her children and her husband. And I swore that I was never going to make that mistake again. I wasn't going to do it. And if you'd have hooked me up to a polygraph in that moment, I'd have passed with flying colors. I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to drink again. And I meant it. I meant it with every fiber of my being. I didn't know that I was a real alcoholic yet at that time. Rewinding, as I rewind after, getting here and walking through the steps with my sponsor and doing my fifth step and really going back through my life to the beginning, and the first time I ever got drunk, really, really drunk. I was 16 years old, and I was an exchange student in Japan, and I'd got invited to go over there, and so here I am, a 6-foot-tall, blue-eyed American boy, halfway around the world, and man, I was, I'd grown up in church and never been around. I mean, I'd been around a little bit of drinking, but there wasn't a whole bunch of partying and that kind of stuff carrying on. We were kind of church-going people kind of thing. So I get over there, and the local Japanese folks, being gracious hosts as they were, they asked me, Gaijin, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Tennessee. And they said, oh, Jack Daniels. So the good folks in Japan knew about Tennessee because of Jack Daniels. And they proceeded to feed me drinks of alcohol, and I found the solution that I had been searching for my whole life up to that point, and I didn't know it. All the nagging insecurity and fear that was deep down into my gut that I just couldn't shake, that something wasn't quite right, it all melted away when I was 16 years old, and I got loaded with alcohol for the first time. And that night ended up, it was not glamorous at all. I left that place in Nagoya, and I walked out of the disco. That was the little bar we were at, and there's neon lights and pachinkos dinging and going over here, and I mean, it was like a Pink Floyd light show. It might as well have been. I mean, I was so out of it. Tracers everywhere. I make it to the train. I get there, and the host family's giving me this bicycle to ride 1 mile from their house to the train station. I get on the bicycle, and I start riding. If any of you ever over there, and you see a sign that looks very similar to a yield sign here in the States, it means the same thing. You're supposed to yield. Well, I didn't do that, and I got hit by a car. Drunker than a bicycle, riding a bicycle, and I got hit by a car. This elderly Japanese woman gets out of her car, and she's so frantic, afraid that she's hurt me. It was probably a good thing I was so drunk, because the bicycle took it way worse than I did. It wasn't rideable. I pushed the thing the rest of the way home, and I get home, and the host family is absolutely hysterical, and rightfully so. They're responsible for this 16-year-old young man that is in their care, and here he is just falling down drunk with a mangled bicycle and bumps and bruises. And I climb up into my little loft thing and lay down on my rice mat to pass out. And, I've thrown up. I end up relieving myself on myself in my sleep. And I come to the next morning and discover all this has happened, and I'm feeling terrible, but I'm feeling great. Like, wow, I'd experienced a solution to all my problems last night, and that was amazing. So fast forward to this thing, and I have the consequences of this thing that I've done years later, and I'm not going to drink anymore. And then the weight of the consequences starts to lift. And it's like, did I overreact a little bit by saying I was never, ever going to drink ever again? Maybe, just maybe, it was the drinking and driving that caused this problem, and I should just not drink and drive. And one of my friends, Steve, who you guys probably know, kind of went through this scenario, and it's just the change in my mind, and I keep backing up the goalpost again. Well, I'm just not going to drink and drive. And then, well, I'm just not going to drink and drive at that time of night or on those roads or drinking that or that amount. I mean, all the way back to I'm just doing it. And all the weight of the consequences that I'd experienced from that terrible accident was blotted out again by my alcoholism. And I carried on, and you might as well just say rinse and repeat until 2006 when I got caught and I had more charges and was looking at more prison time. And this time I found my way to a seat in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'd been introduced to AA back then, but I went into an old church it's a fellowship hall with brown paneling on the sides, and smoke was hanging about right here in the room. And I was like, whoa, this ain't for me. The truth is I wasn't ready to get sober yet. Fast forward to 06, and I find my way to a seat in Alcoholics Anonymous. And for whatever reason, maybe it was the threat of the consequences, the nudge from the judge, whatever it was, I heard something. And I actually started listening to your stories, and I heard you sharing about how you'd been thinking and feeling and drinking. And you got me. You got to me. You'd been reading my mail. And so I started listening, and I started going to more meetings, and I got a sponsor, and I worked the steps, and my life took off like a rocket. It was amazing. A year and a half in, I finally get a disposition to my old court stuff, and I end up with 45 days in jail, lose my license for 2 years for a second offense DUI. And I end up going to the workhouse to jail for a little while, and then they send me to treatment. They give me the option to go to a treatment facility, and I said, yes, please, street clothes and regular cigarettes instead of keister tobacco. I'll take that. So that's what I do. And I go walking up into the treatment center. Now, mind you, I'm an inmate, right? I'm inpatient here at this place, and I walk up in there with my big book, 18 months sober, talking about I'm going to sponsor some boys up in here. And maybe that should have been a clue, right? I mentioned earlier Dr. Harry Tebow and that resurgence of the ego in the alcoholic. It was already happening, and it had probably been happening prior to that, but it was happening. And I get in there, and one of the things I did while I was in there is a lady who was a counselor there, who was, had a whole group of people in this room and giving this class, and she was, trying to help us, right? She'd gone to school for many years and gotten a degree and devoted her life to helping knuckleheads like me, but she wasn't one of us. Well, she's trying to help us in this class, and she's sharing some information with us that's inconsistent with the message in our big book. And I felt compelled to let her know in front of the class that what she was trying to tell us was contrary to what's in our big book and what I knew worked. I got to make amends for that later. Another example of the ego, I'll fast forward to November the 2nd of that year, and I'm a groomsman in my boss's wedding. I'm a little over 2 years sober now. And about 6 months prior to this, I've quit calling my sponsor because he was too busy, and so was I, and I quit going to meetings, and I quit praying, and I quit reading my big book, and I quit reaching out to other alcoholics. Y'all see where this is going, right? And I find myself in this place at the Grandview Mansion up there at Rock City in Chattanooga up on Lookout Mountain. And I'm in there, and they got shots of liquor, and then they've got some ginger ale for me. All these guys, my boss and all the other groomsmen, know me. They know that I don't drink, that I'm in recovery and all this. So I reach out and pick up one of those shots of liquor, and you couldn't have choreographed it any better. They all looked at me at the same time. They're like, dude, what are you doing? I said, guys, easy. This ain't for me. This is for him. This is his special day. And I tossed back that shot of liquor, and I felt it all the way down to the end of my toenails. And I didn't drink anything else the rest of that night because I had something to prove. That shot was for him. It wasn't for me, and I was committed to being a designated driver. So I went to the reception afterward in the pavilion in the full open bar, and everybody else drinking, and then carting everybody else downtown to the club later on that night. It was an absolutely beautiful wedding, y'all. It was the most miserable wedding I've ever been to in my whole life. Because the only thing I could think about, obsess over after taking that shot of liquor was the fact that I had taken that shot of liquor. And what was triggered in me that I believe now was the phenomenon of craving, and I had enough willpower in that moment to resist taking another drink for that night. But it wasn't long, and for 39 months I was out. And I reached what is the end on January the 25th of 2012. And I was on the backside of a mountain down in Sequatchie County in an old rundown trailer with no water and bootleg lights. Any of you ever fool with sticking a butter knife into a meter socket? That's what bootleg lights looks like. And it's dangerous. And I'd been doing the shake, rattle, and roll there for about 2 weeks. And I was out of money, and nobody would answer the phone. And everybody had written me off. Finally, everybody had written me off. Later, I would talk to my mother, and she would share with me when I was making amends to her that the only way she could finally be able to sleep through the night was when she resigned herself to the reality that her son was going to die before her. And once she accepted that, she was able to sleep at night. I finally surrendered, and probably the first humble thing I've ever said, and I didn't recognize it as that at the time, But I said a prayer, an honest prayer, and I said, I can't do this by myself. I need help. And that started a journey for me that's been increasingly more wonderful and more miraculous as time passes. I had the gift of desperation that motivated me to surrender. And I called my old sponsor, Matt H. God used that man to save my life. I said, man, will you take me back, basically is what I said. And he said, do what they tell you and call me when you get home. And I did. And when I got home, I hit town and went straight to his house and was sitting at his kitchen table. And that's when he shared with me what I shared with you earlier. You know, he told me my ego was going to kill me if I didn't do something different. And, you know, I was unemployable and unemployed at the time. And going to meetings and working the steps was what I had to do. And I'm grateful that, you know, God put that man in my life to be there, to be able to guide me through this process at that moment in time. All that happened for a reason. And I got relieved of the obsession to drink alcohol. And now I can go anywhere in the world and have. I've been all over the world to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. Heck, y'all, I went to Oktoberfest, the real Oktoberfest, in Munich, Germany, not once, but twice, sober. Yeah, that's AA. AA did that for me. I didn't do that. I don't have the ability to do something like that. This whole experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, especially lately being involved in service, has given me some time, not a lot of time, but I make time to reflect on what my real purpose here is. And I can sit before y'all today and tell you that no matter what I do in Alcoholics Anonymous today, the most important thing I do is show up for my home group and be available for another member of Alcoholics Anonymous or a drunk that needs help. There's nothing else that I can do. No service commitment, no workshop, no speaking engagement, no group inventory, no nothing that's more important than showing up for my home group and showing up to carry this message that was so freely given to me. That's it. That's the most important thing. And it has to stay the most important thing, because when it's not the most important thing anymore, we're on a slippery slope. That's it.
Amy Swain Duncan, alcoholic. Hey, sobriety date March 6, 2010. You know, we started looking at the traditions and the concepts, and now we're at the steps, the pathway to my personal recovery, and it is the most vital part, because without personal recovery, without the steps, I'm not going to move. I can't do them backwards. I'm going to learn about the concepts and see if I can quit drinking or whatever. Like, that's not going to work. So for each of us, our individual journey starts in the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I did want to point out, like, this meeting was packed last night, right? Because everybody likes a speaker meeting and we like to come out. But who wants to give up their Saturday morning? And my friend Tim calls us the 5%, or the 5%. The good news, if you've got a year and you're here, giving up your Saturday to hear some idiots talk about three legacies, that in itself doesn't look like the solution to my problems, right? You probably got to unpack, and you got to, first day out of the sober living house, but when I make this my primary purpose, everything else falls into place. And our literature talks about that when we straighten out spiritually, we begin to straighten out mentally and physically, right? So I have this spiritual malady I have to address. And in the realm of spirit, things that would make sense to my pragmatic or my material or my earthly mind, that's not the language the spirit speaks. So my dad said when he got sober, he said, oh, they just talk in nursery rhymes, and all the little slogans, and it's hard for me to kind of hear what's being said. So how does selfless service to others, how's that going to solve my problems, right? Because I'm selfish and self-centered, and I want to do this, and that surrender that we've heard about, like surrendering to something I don't understand, and that it doesn't make sense. Early on in recovery, we talk about fitting ourselves for maximum service, getting myself sober. My first problem is that I can't stop drinking. That's my first problem. I can't stop drinking. Even when I swear I'm not going to, even when there are consequences hanging over, no matter the necessity or the wish, I cannot stop drinking. That's the first problem of the day. And we have to get the plug in the jug so grace covers the spread. We get that day, my friend Peter says, the day that a loving and merciful God interrupted my death and separated me from alcohol. So that's a sobriety date. I didn't do anything to get my sobriety date. It was just given to me. What I did after that day was try to hang on to it. Right? And try to follow instruction, try to get in the literature, try to be of service, all the things you're telling me to do, and I'm trying to do all of them, and I'm going foot to pavement in this deal, and I'm going hard and fast, man. Just like I was in the madness, I'm going hard and fast in recovery, and I'm moving all the chairs, and I'm going to all the meetings, and I'm handing out the big books that I'm reading, I'm studying, I got a highlighter, and I got a pen, and I'm taking notes. Because I'm going to get sober. And that's what I was doing, and but through the steps, through this process, I found relief. And I knew not to skip any part. I knew was read in Concept 9, that my life or death hung in the balance. And for the first time in a long time, I wanted to live. So I took this stuff seriously. Like, I was not playing around with recovery or what I was here to do. And I became part of that 5%, right? So I would show up at things that nobody would show up. Me and 6 other people, but Buddy were there. But I began to form these relationships with people in doing so. And as I worked through the steps, I can't see me, right? So I don't recognize that I'm changing, that I'm growing, that I'm doing better. And so with words of encouragement from older members, from my sponsor, from my peers that were getting sober with me, they're noticing, they're proud of you. I love you. I see this change in you. You're doing good. You're doing better. And it was enough to feed me so I would keep going on. And I had a sponsor that wasn't going to let me take an easier, softer route. Like, we were going to do a 4-step, we were going to do a 5-step, we were going to do a 6, and we're going to do a 7. And Buddy, we're going to look at those amends. And I'm glad that she took the time with me. Amends wasn't like something I was left to do on my own. We went over my amends. What do you, and I was guilty of this. When we get to amends, after we did a 5th step, I'd be like, okay, your mom, your sister, your boyfriend, your kids, go make amends. And without instruction, without going over, we should write this on a card, what you're gonna say and what you're making amends for, because I've heard some crazy amends, and when I started checking with women about what they were gonna say and having them write them out on a card and letting me review them, I was like, whoa, how many people have I sent off to make these crazy amends? I'm sorry you were hurt when I wasn't well. What? What? I'm sorry, what? No, I'm sorry I hurt you. Right? I'm sorry I stole $20 from you. And as I learn more, I'm able to offer more guidance through that process. And again, that's our responsibility at this point, to grow in effectiveness and understanding. But I was given those directions. I was given the tools necessary. And then after the amends, there was a check-in. What did you do? What agreement have you arrived at with the people that you love that is going to help you in this amends process? And I talked a little bit about that last night. And then that 10-step inventory and doing it and doing it as I walk around. There's so many tools for this. Don Majors would suggest, and others too, but that, and it's like the parking lot prayer, right? So when I walk in a room, that I hold the door a few seconds so that God can come with me, right? When I get in my car, I just pause for a moment so God can get in. Am I maintaining conscious contact with my Creator? I can outrun my angels, you know. I got ADHD pretty hard. I can go fast and furious, you know. And I look up, and it's like the last time I thought about God was in morning prayer, and it's 1 o'clock. How much damage have I done from morning prayer to after lunch? Well, I can tell you I've cussed out bosses and lost jobs, you know, because I'm not staying in that the effort and the consciousness it takes to kind of capture that and carry that throughout my day. I let you guys know last night, I avoided meditation. I'm a real good prayer. I didn't like meditation. I'm doing half a step 11. And that's why people are getting hurt in my 12-step work, because I'm not prepared to carry this message. I haven't done the work. I haven't done all the parts of all the steps and fit myself for maximum service. So through the power of meditation, I'm connected. I'm connected to Source. I'm connected to you. I'm less likely to hit you in the face if I feel like you and I are the same person. There is no us and them, there is only us, you know. And so this connection, this freedom that this gives me inside this worldwide fellowship, and the ability to move effectively and to be of service, because that's the end goal, right? To fit myself for maximum service. And then from that, I launch into traditions, I launch into concepts, and we take baby steps along the way as we grow and develop in this deal. One of the things with the recovery aspect is not losing sight of my personal recovery, right? Because if I'm not plugged into Alcoholics Anonymous, if I'm not doing the deal, right, I'm on that slippery slope. And we were talking about it yesterday, how many men and women we know, and we see them at meetings trying to get back, and their opening statement is, I used to have 2 years. I used to have 4 years. I used to have 10 years. I used to have 27 years. I used to have. And that always rang in my ear. And in 2010, I would hear that and I would think, God, please don't ever let me be the woman that used to have. Because it's so hard to get back when you used to have. Right? So if you're here today and you've got some time and you've got your seat, don't be the person that used to have. Be the person who has. Be the person who has today. And we're guaranteed that and I think I said it last night, I underestimated the enemy, right? An insidious foe. Insidious means it looks harmless. That shot you took at the wedding, that looked harmless. How could that shot at a wedding with your boss and your good friends end a few short years later in a trailer on the backside of a mountain? What happened? This insidious foe. Jack Wheeler is one of my favorite speakers. He talks about on his way to his home group, and the trout were running, and he was supposed to be at home group, but the trout were running. So he pulled over on the side of the road and he got out his fishing pole and he went trout fishing. He said, you know what happened? Nothing. Insidious. But the next week, the same thing happened and he missed his home group. And he said, you know what happened? Nothing. But then Jack Wheeler's drunk. He's a guy who used to have, right? It's in these little things that we do that hold these seemingly meaningless, unimportant events that hold the whole thing together by this spiritual membrane, right, that creates our lives. We hear about going to Oktoberfest. Me and my friends just got back from Bali. I smoke crack. Like, how did I get to Bali? Like, what is this? There's no way you get from where I was to where I am today. And I didn't plan it and I didn't create it and it wasn't of my intention. All I ever did was say yes to Alcoholics Anonymous. Because they told me to say yes to Alcoholics Anonymous. And through a series of random, weird yeses, yes, I'll take a meeting to the women's penitentiary. Yes, I'll take a meeting to the dismiss house. Yes, I'll take a meeting to the homeless shelter. Yes, I will sponsor you. Yes, I will put away the chairs. Yes, I will make the coffee. Yes, we can go through the book. Yes, I will answer my phone when it rings and jangles all day and night. Expect to be inconvenienced. By saying yes to this, I say God has to distract me with something shiny, like a little meaningless task, like opening a church. And while he's got me busy doing that, he builds this beautiful life for me. And I turn around and all of a sudden I go, how did I get here? What is going on? And it was through a series of small yeses over and over every day to the responsibility of service and commitment in Alcoholics Anonymous. The fourth dimension, this place of spirituality and magic and wonder, right, that we're promised in Alcoholics Anonymous. Not everybody finds it. And I always say you can't find it because it's behind the door marked inconvenient. So most people don't go through it. But if you're the guy, and you are because you're here today, if you'll open the door marked inconvenient, in there the magic is hidden. And it's available for all of us. I'm glad you guys are here today. Thank you so much.
I thought I heard music. Did you not hear it?
It's all in your head, bro. It's okay.
That's your soundtrack.
I think it was an echo, seriously. My name's Kevin. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Kevin.
Don't know why I set that on there. Excuse me. Sticking with the theme of being able to see myself in the pages of that book, seeing myself in the traditions, seeing myself in the concepts. I had to be able to relate to the things that it was saying in order to be receptive to what it was saying. And man, when you're sitting in meetings early on, I was not the 5%. I just looked over here at Jimmy when you were talking about that, and I says, at a year sober, I would not have been here on a Saturday morning. I'm just being completely honest. I would have had somewhere else to be because I was not thinking about other people at that point, including my friends or family or coworkers. You know, you heard me say earlier it was 3.5 years in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous before I ever asked someone to sponsor me, and I didn't realize that if I wanted something at Alcoholics Anonymous, all I ever had to do was just ask. That I've been running around these rooms and doing all of this little service work and mopping the floors and cleaning ceiling fans and washing ashtrays and coming to meetings and chairing meetings and doing all this stuff to feel as miserable as I was feeling at 3.5 years. And I thought that if this was all AA had to offer, I didn't want it. And it wasn't whether or not I was going to drink. It was a Thursday night and I was home alone. My wife and the children were gone somewhere, and I wrote a note out and I stuck it on the door for her to not bring the kids in to call my parents or to call my mother. And I was just going to shoot myself. I took my 9mm and I stuck it in my throat, and I stood there trembling and shaking and crying. And I think that was really probably the very first time in sobriety that I thought about someone besides myself. Because I thought of my mother. And I thought of my wife and my children. And a little small part of me thought that this is the things that I've always done. This is typical Kevin fashion. Just destroy everything around me, throw the pieces in their laps, and let them pick them up, while I tuck tail, run, and hide, and not have to deal with any of it. And that was that little thought, that little tap on my shoulder from God that night was a huge wake-up call for me. Because then I really realized that there has to be more to Alcoholics Anonymous than I was given a fair shake. It's not that it was Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not that going to meetings were harming me. Going to meetings and not working the steps and not helping other people was killing me. There was a lot more to it than just showing up for meetings and doing the things that I thought I needed to be doing. If you were a real alcoholic like me, and step one tells me that we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our life had become unmanageable. I'm not going to lie, step one was an issue with me as I'm going through the book. They all were. But I was like, I'm not so sure my life is unmanageable. I mean, I told my sponsor that. And you know, and I got the book pulled up right here, and you see me on my phone. That's what I was doing. And he flipped me right back over into the book on page 52. These problems of unmanageability in our lives. We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change. And I know we're talking about step 2 right here, but these problems of unmanageability, really, I could see myself in these pages. We were having trouble with our personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. It was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flights. Of course it was. And every single one of those checked the box for me. Every one of them. It was no question of whether or not my life had become unmanageable. I seen myself right there in the book. But see, when I'm trying to teach myself something, I'm going to skip the important chapters. I'm going to skip the things that I don't want to know about. I'm going to make the test as easy as I can on me. You know, the book tells me that we have path, singular. Our path. It's not plural. And a little bit later on, right there, and right before we take the steps, it says we stood at the turning point. And then we pray. We ask His protection and care with complete abandonment. Why am I praying? Assuming, of course, that if I'm going on to the next step, that I'm at this turning point. It's on page 25, 26. I don't know personally, but some of y'all could just quote it on the third line on page 25 or whatever. But where it says, I have 2 alternatives, and one's to go on to the bitter end. That's death. Blotting out my intolerable situation as best I can. Blotting out the consciousness of my intolerable situation best I can. And then the other is to seek spiritual help. Yeah. And then I understood that is the only path that we have to offer in Alcoholics Anonymous, is this path to a spiritual experience. And how is that accomplished? And it's through 12 simple but not easy steps. The first of which is that I had to admit that I was powerless. I knew that. I wasn't so sure my life was unmanageable. You know, my sponsor did this amazing thing, and we were on page 52. He says, now turn to page 83. I want you to, I mean, we flipped over 31 and then 32 because it goes 83 and 84. In 31 pages, the exact opposite of those problems of unmanageability are written in the 9 step promises. Where we couldn't control our emotional natures and were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't seem to be a real help to other people. We were full of fear. It says fear will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations. It says that we're not going to be, that we're going to be used to other people. The exact opposite. And it's 31 short pages. This much of the book. And I've been making such a big deal over this 4th step and all of these other things that just, we always put a lot of emphasis on these, and it's not, they're all important. But if you look, the first 4 chapters is all information on steps 1 and 2. Chapter 5 details steps 3 and 4. Chapter 6, you got 6 through 11. And then the rest of the book's devoted entirely to the 12th step. We've got this small little section in there where all of these problems of unmanageability in my life are going to be cast out. And it just made it so simple for me. It just broke it down so much. And then step 2, I struggled with. It says in that same chapter there in We Agnostics, it said when dealing with spiritual terms, or we had better use common everyday language, something to that effect. You know, and I had this guy in my life who loved me enough to do just that. He said, well, since you're so powerful, make me take a drink. I thought he meant like physically hold him down and force it down. And he's like, no, no, no. You should be able to just think it into existence. I said, I can't do that. And he said, I know you can't. Smiled. It's not because I'm more powerful than you. It's because I believe in something that's more powerful than both of us that's keeping me sober. And I could wrap this little pea-sized brain in my head around that. I could say that. It's tangible proof right in front of my eyes. I could not deny that the power that this man was believing in was real, because he was sober and I was struggling to live. And I could not wait to continue going through the next steps. And then in the 3rd step prayer and getting on my knees, did it with him, and then got home and humbly did it. The wording, of course, was quite optional. But gosh, what a feeling. The love of this mighty God that is in my life, and the things that have resulted of those things. And we talk about fitting ourselves to be a maximum service to God and to other people. And it's important that I understand that doesn't always mean me giving you what you want. As a matter of fact, most of the time it's not going to be that way. But how may I help meet your needs? I have to remember that with my children. I have to remember that with sponsees. I have to remember that with my coworkers. Because trust me when I tell you, when I've got a sponsee in jail, he wants money on his books. And occasionally, I'll do that. But what I know he needs is hopelessness. And if I continue to just put that money on his books, am I really being a maximum service? I think not. Because I do, as an alcoholic, have a tendency to get in the way of God's will. I do have a tendency to do what I think is right. And more often than not, what I think is right is wrong. And I got one that's about to get out, and he called me the other day, and he is so happy that I put money on his books. Once. Because I think he's at a point now to where he wants to seek some hope. I don't know why I was saying all of that. I was getting to a point there, but either way, it's, the life that I've been given as a result of all 36 principles that we've set up here and talked about today is, like Jimmy said, it's unimaginable. I have these beautiful relationships. God. I love them. These beautiful grandchildren. I think of the life that I could have missed in my house on that Thursday night by myself. And looking back now, knowing that it would have just been the same old me doing the same old thing that I always did. And that's just letting everybody else figure it out. And then it would have ensured that my life would have never gotten any better. And then I look around at the lives of my family, my kids, and to see the things that they're doing. To hear my youngest son tell me less than 6 months ago, I asked him, I says, Drew, what was the changing point in you? And you talk about the dying, your mother sleeping at ease. That was a reality in our own home. Best sleep we got was when he was in prison. You best believe that. But my wife drove him around at one point and made him show her where he wanted to be buried. She had resigned to that fact that we were going to bury him. But less than 6 months ago, I asked him, Drew, what was the turning point? What I'm using to say, hey, what's the turning point? he said, well, he says, you know, Daddy, you've been sober what now, 17, 18 years? I said, yeah, thereabouts, 18, I think, somewhere around there. He's like, yeah, he says, you know, I never really put a whole lot of thought into it, and I heard a lot of the things that you used to always tell me, and he says, but over the last several years, I couldn't deny what was happening in your life was real. Because no matter what I was doing, no matter how much I stole from your mother, no matter what I did, no matter what I said, no matter how many doors I slammed or windows I broke, you and Mother never treated me any differently. You weren't going to tolerate it. You made me get out. You let me suffer. But I knew y'all loved me. And the only thing I could do was thank God. The principles that this program was talking about were being applied in all of our affairs. The way my drinking affected my wife and my children, Alcoholics Anonymous has affected it 100 times more. And I am so grateful. I am so grateful, eternally grateful. There's no way that I could ever repay this gift monetarily, that's for sure. But I'm going to work as hard as I can till the day that I die to share with others what was so freely shared with me. You best believe that. And it's just again, I thank you guys for putting this on. I thank you for having us up here. It's been a pleasure to spend some time with you all this weekend, and I look forward to our paths crossing again as we trudge this road. Thank you.
Yeah.